Welcome to another episode of the And Both podcast. My guest this week is Chauncey Zalkin. She's one of those people that you could probably spend like 6 hours just sitting in a room with, talking about all of these amazing adventures and journeys that she's been on in her life. And so I wanted to tell you about her in a bio format before you meet her. So she's a writer, a creative entrepreneur, a former multi-agency brand strategist, and most recently, Senior VP of Marketing at tech startups, establishing brand architecture, cross-channel, cross-funnel messaging, and operationalizing marketing and building processes for success. She writes the Meaningful Marketing column at Inc. magazine. As a member of the Chief Network of Female Leaders, she has lived all over the world: New York, Paris, Barcelona, Miami. She's in North Carolina right now, has twin daughters, was a creative director and co-founder of a documentary storytelling company called Show Love with clients like Comcast, NBCU, Timex, Beyond Meat, Baby Ganix, Cotton Inc., Edible Schoolyard, and a whole bunch of designers, makers, dancers, brewers, and has won awards in a number of different areas for her work there. So she's written for 14 publications internationally, was nominated for a Webby with her first company, Girl on the Street, which was featured in Teen People, the New York Post, and others. She has worked with so many amazing brands. She's written a novel. She's hosted 10 award-winning female designers and artists from 6 countries, 3 continents at the London Design Festival as part of Designer's Block. Her passion is writing, creativity, authenticity, and entrepreneurship, and loves to use her skills to help meaningful companies and initiatives further their story. Chauncey is an incredible human to get a chance to interact with and know, because she just has such a through line of authenticity and calling things what they are and seeing the bigger picture and being just so real and authentic. There's really no other word. So without further ado, here's Chauncey. Hello and welcome to the And Both podcast. Here we are going to hear from moms and those in motherhood that are doing the thing that works for them. They are honoring themselves alongside the all-encompassing role and level of expectation that is modern motherhood. And we are going to hear from as many different people as possible in their own experience. So you can find people to relate to. You can hear stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, all of the above, and that we will come together as a community to support one another in a way that is holistic and honoring of the woman and the mother as a whole. Hello and welcome back to the And Both podcast. Today I am here with Chauncey, and we have so many things to talk about. I'm really excited for this episode. But first of all, thank you and thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I haven't been pursuing being on other people's podcasts lately. Before I started one, I did. I should be. So I'm really glad that you reached out.
Yeah, no, I am thrilled. And we met ahead of your podcast launch. And then you launched your podcast and I was like, okay, this is really good. It was the one that you had talked about music. And it was like, there was just like, I mean, you are a writer for sure. You are a writer, because like everything that was in the episode, I was like, oh my God, this is so intense in the best way possible. It's just like all of these pieces that you just like pulled together. Like this was not, sometimes you go on a podcast and you're just like, or you listen to a podcast and you're like, okay, this is nice. Like I was like in my kitchen, like stopped moving and was like, yeah, that's so cool, about just how you're pulling in pieces of history and music together. So
thank you so much. It's the way I can deal with like my obsessive thoughts about like trying to put things together. Thank you. I didn't even know that you had listened to that or that anyone had. So
Oh yeah, for sure. So before we get into stuff like that, why don't you have you introduce yourself and tell people what you want them to know about you?
Okay. Well, I spent almost a career being in brand marketing and kind of just being pulled into that because I was a writer. And so, with all the upheaval of the last couple of years in the startup community, which is what I was leading marketing in, and in just just thought of being an entrepreneur and, working for companies, there's just been so much change and flux that I kind of had a like come to Jesus moment. It's like, it's really time for me to lean into writing. And I've always been a writer, but it's never been my bread and butter. So I am by training a brand strategist and a marketing leader in the startup world, but I am a writer about culture and trends. And like you said before we started recording, like it's really hard to encapsulate all of it in just a couple sentences. But I'm really interested in the future and understanding how we're going to navigate both on a very personal level, the world that we're moving into, as well as like these overarching themes in culture. And I like to sort of connect the dots. And meanwhile, I do write fiction, and I'm daring myself to share more of that. And that fiction often has a lot to do with cultural specificity and storytelling around like microcultures that I've experienced in different places I've lived.
Yeah, because you are writing a book, right? I think last time we spoke, you were either like kicking around the idea or you had started.
I have written a book already, and fiction called Rock Underwater, and it's not anywhere. And I on one of my podcasts, I started reading the first chapter of another book I've written, which is not complete as a book, but is, at least halfway in. And it's called Claw, about a man that's really a monster. And I read it, and I had one person, I have like one like big fan who she's like, I need the next chapter. I'm like, really? You like it? Because I'm very, more vulnerable. I feel more vulnerable about my fiction than I am to my nonfiction. But the idea of writing a nonfiction book I'm thinking about it, but I really am passionate about my fiction.
Well, you've got so many things that you're trying to balance there. It's like startup marketing and like, let's offset that with some fiction and let's just try. It's like trying to balance out all of these different areas.
I know. Well, I'm trying to move from marketing and like leave it behind and just be a writer, and maybe potentially I might go back to school to become a therapist and have that be my job, like my day job, working. Cause I'm interested in human psychology and working directly with people. So we'll see. If I get in, I'll probably go.
That's awesome. So are you applying to schools to go in?
I can't apply until December. So it's like this weird, I like went really gung ho into it, and now I'm in this weird limbo because I decided I wanted to do this right after the deadlines. I didn't, and they won't, I'm like, oh, I forget how schools work. They won't just like let you in after that. I'm like, oh, and I apply now. They're like, no, you have to wait. No, you cannot. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I have to wait another year. And I'm a little old to go to grad school traditionally, but I just feel like that's the right thing to do because I don't want to work in marketing anymore.
Yeah. Well, you were in marketing, like you were in like a little bit of marketing. You were in it like in New York City, like with some really big brands, right? When you were there
in brand strategy and advertising. And then in the last 5 years, I became like VP of marketing of these smaller tech startups. And I liked it, but that's not, I'm a creative person and I love business, but more from the cultural aspect or the storytelling of it. So I do like doing that. I just don't want to do marketing anymore. I want to do my piece of it, which is like helping people tell their stories. But eventually I just want to be a writer and maybe a therapist. So it's like a career change.
Yeah, it's like you go from being on the marketing side. It's like trying to figure out the psychology of what people are going to want and what they're going to connect to. And then you're like going on the other side of the river and like, people are saying these are the things that I'm looking for and I want to connect with. So it's kind of cool that you're working your way like to the other side of the street almost.
Yeah, towards like a more personal, like actually I was like, well, at the end of the day, I'm like, I just want to work with people and help people. And I'm interested in that. And I also am a writer and I like the creative aspect. I'm not sure if I want like marketing strategy doesn't really interest me. I'm not even sure if I'm good at marketing strategy, like where it's like selling. I'm not, I'm a storyteller. I'm a people person. I don't know.
You are for sure. And you are also a mom.
I am a mom. That's how we met.
Twins, right?
Yes. 10-year-old twins.
10-year-old twins. That's a thing because they are in that like that's a transition time and period,
It
and having
is.
two of them.
How old are your kids?
I have 11, 9, 6, and 4.
Oh my God. So I
Yeah.
haven't read this book yet, but there's a book out by Miranda July. Do you know Miranda July?
I've
She's
heard that
a
name.
very quirky writer and filmmaker. And
Okay.
I've read one or two of her things and seen one or two of her movies, and she's amazing. You should definitely check her out. But she has a new book out, which I haven't read, but someone referenced. I'm like, oh, I have to go. And it's about how you're a parent and you separate your parenting from your creativity or writing, or and it's something about like peeing in a jar while she's writing so she doesn't have to like go deal with her kids and leave her office, which I thought was it's an extreme. But I had been wondering a couple days ago, like, why don't I talk more about my kids in my I do mention them, but I don't like get into parenting like a lot of people were in Hey Mama talk about their like that's some of their work life is about parenting, and it isn't for me. And I'm like, why do I keep it so separate? But so that'd be an interesting thing to kind of discuss, like talking about your kids or leaving them out of it. I think this is like my time away from parenting.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's really fascinating because there is, and I guess in a lot of ways, like going through that process of having children and like being in this age and stage of like where are like my older kids and your twins are, is like you're at this point where if you've been trying to sort of like keep pieces of you along the way, and now like your kids are definitely more independent and they're getting older, it's like I feel like there's this element of like you're not trying to figure out what you want to do and who you want to be as much as somebody who maybe sort of was more enveloped and engulfed in that, whereas you have such a strong like this is who I am and this is what I like to do, and have like stayed in that so much so. Like you have a really big separation between the two in a way that's, I don't think there's a good or bad, but I just feel like I noticed like with you, like when we've talked in the past, it's been like about creativity and it's been about like the pieces of you. And it's like, yes, I also have kids.
I know, but with my kid, but it's a lot of the way I parent. I talk to them and they are like, one of them is like, wants to be an animator and she sits and animates things, and she is surprising me. She can't like help herself, but tell me with an animation to my intro to my podcast, and they listen to my podcast. I let them listen. We listen to it, and I'm like, if they don't want to, they don't have to. It's not like you have to listen to this, but we also do a lot of creative projects together, and like they both like written books, like little books and with chapters, and they're maybe better than me at writing. I don't know. They're like really good. Like they make sense and there's like a beginning and an end, and they do it quickly. And so it's like part of my parenting is, and also I always think, okay, I want to show them that I can make it as a creative person. Like it's also a demonstration. So when I fail or if there's a lapse in work, I feel not shame, but like, I want to be like, look, you can do this. So it is part of my parenting to kind of demonstrate for them that you can be like a creative person and an entrepreneur and own your own life. And it doesn't always work out for me, but that's like part of my, like what I'm trying to show them is possible. So it's like, there's pressure there.
Always pressure, so much pressure.
But we have like a creative family. Like we write, we read, we do creative projects.
Did you grow up in more of the creative side, or did you grow up in more of the business marketing side?
Well, I never had any, marketing was never on. I wanted to be a fashion designer, and then I wanted to be a magazine editor. I never wanted to go into marketing for a single minute. I studied cultural studies and semiotics in school. My mother read a lot and like talked to us about books a lot. My dad was an entrepreneur and, varying degrees of success, like had a lot of money at some point, lost all his money. I talk about my dad a lot on the podcast, like left us nothing financially, but he was he was like, he owned his own life. And I thought that was really like, he never worked for anyone else. And he was very, I think I like looked up to him just because he was who he was. There was no, like, he didn't make himself small for anyone. And I thought that was really, I mean, that's like kind of the most important thing to me. So he was a businessman, like he was interested in business strategy for himself. And so I overheard a lot of that on my dad's side. On my mom's side, it was like books and art and culture. And so, yeah, I never was told go to medical school, or my dad kind of wanted me to go to law school, actually. But no talk of like a practical career. Maybe there should have been more of it, actually. So no.
Can you imagine though, if your parents were like, we would like for you to go to law school, and you're like, have we met? Like, it just not.
Oh, law school sounds just so awful. I mean, my dad went to law school to avoid the draft to be in the Vietnam War, but he like practiced, I don't know, very little before I was born. He never practiced law. He studied tax law, but he sold screen wire and like imported fans. Anyway, it's a different era. I always think I should just write a book about my dad because I find that very interesting. Like the 70s and 80s. And I don't know if you've listened to those episodes where I talk about like growing up in Miami in the 80s.
Oh my God. I have not heard that one yet, but I can only imagine like a neon dream. Just
during the Miami Vice era. I'm like, I'm kind of into that right now. I'm in the remembering 80s Miami era, and it's a lot on my podcast. And I just read this book called Hotel Scarface, which is the Mutiny Hotel, which my dad lived at for a little while. And it was the hotel where Scarface was based.
Oh, geez.
Yes. Interesting times.
I feel like if your parents weren't like if your dad wasn't an entrepreneur, he would have been like a film person, like based on the amount of like creativity that like you exude just in like what you put out there in terms of like the podcast piece and the writing and all of those things. Like, I feel like if someone was like, can you tell me what her parents did? I'd be like, film or arts or something.
Well, I asked him why he didn't do that. He's like, because I didn't understand how they could make money off of music. We're talking about like media moguls and music. And I don't know how they die. For me, it was buy for $1 and sell for $2. I didn't understand that. But he had friends in the industry, one of which was shot by his girlfriend, famously. But yeah, he was around that. by like his mistress, so I caught his. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. That's a book, right? Like you just have all these like books just like flowing out of you.
Yeah. So as a parent, like I also like, I'm a single mom. So it's like, I'm always just with my kids. So I think these things get like stored up in my head. I can't tell them all this stuff. I tell them abbreviated versions of it, but like my dad passed in 2019. So, it's like piecing together the puzzle of my father is part of coming into my podcast. I was planning on writing a book about him. That's why I recorded like 8 conversations or 10 conversations with him before he died.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So I have these like banks of stories. Like I can't misremember because I asked him questions.
That's fascinating. Like to be able to pull that and like pull his own words back into it even.
Yeah. Cause sometimes I'm like, oh, I didn't know he felt that way. And then I like listened to what he said, but he did tell me, I'm like, why weren't you like a media mogul? You were like around, like this jet city life. Why didn't you do that? He's like, he didn't understand how they did it, why they were making money off of musicians and artists. But
oh my gosh. And your mom is still alive, right?
We don't speak.
Okay. So there's like, you get that like creative, like art piece influence in there.
Yeah. And I did admire, like I did get a lot from her that way, but she's got a personality disorder. I mean, it's complicated, but she's not without merit. She's very intelligent and very like intellectually curious person. And I'm sure she still is. We email a little here and there, but it's not great.
Yeah. I think I'm always sort of fascinated by like the things that we bring from our parents that we put into like the stuff that we show our kids. And like, it may not always come from a place of like I think when we do that stuff, I think when we carry things on, the intent is always good. And even if we experienced it in a way where not necessarily the intent was bad, but like you can kind of like, as you get away from being the child and you become the parent, you're like, okay, I can kind of understand what the intention was here, and then carry on that to your children. And that's how that.
I think that you do more from what you see than what they tell you. I think you get more from what you've seen around you. And then you can process it through a filter of whether the good parts. You can say, well, like I have been told, and I feel like I have very strong morals, like almost crippling. And I don't think my father had those kind of strong morals. So that's kind of like an overcompensation.
Yeah.
This kind of came up yesterday in therapy. Because my therapist remarked, like, she's like, you have really strong moral code. And I was thinking, my dad didn't. As much. I mean, he wasn't like a horrible he was very honest about everything, but he wasn't a drug dealer, and he wasn't like, I was just thinking, like, he was around this, like, and he's like, oh, I would have known. Like, I asked him, like, that world was around you, why didn't you do that? Like, he's like, oh my God, somebody once offered me money, asked me for money to invest in a drug business. And he was like, he's like, no way. I mean, he was like kind of excited that somebody even approached him, because he kind of liked the criminal. It's like, somebody asked me actually for like several tens of thousands of dollars for like this, he's bringing like cocaine into the country. Like, he's like, it was like, I was terrified. I was like, no way. Like, because he always told me, like, no way, don't go anywhere near like any, like, you're going to be implicated because there's a lot of like corruption in Miami in the 80s. So you would see that, like, he was a nice Jewish boy, like, top of his class and stuff. But, all the people we knew in Miami, like, there was there was just a lot of crazy stuff going on. So there was you had to touch it somehow. But yeah, he was like, no way, like, terrified of all that. Why am I bringing up the drug thing? Oh, my moral code is just very strong. But like, from my father, I get like some of some of my personality and interests, like in business, and same with my mom. Like, she, I don't know. It's like you try to take the good stuff, and then you try to get therapy for the bad stuff, or weed it out, or right. Like, we just try to improve upon our parents. And I think our generations are way more self-aware than the past generations.
Yeah. Right? I think that, there's definitely, I feel like it's sort of like, it kind of feels like the ball like rolled downhill for a long time, and it just sort of like went to the next one and went to the next one. And I feel like our generation, it's like there's enough awareness, and there's enough there's enough questioning of like, why was it like that, or why did it have to be like that? And like the idea or the excuse or the reasoning of it's the way it's always been, so it's the way it's going to be, like, somehow that expired for so many people. And I think we just have such a generation of people that are saying like, no, that doesn't really work. And so we're doing things differently in terms of like really taking a look at ourselves as parents. And that's why, that's why you have all of these movements that come up, right? And like, I think we borrow from it, like the gentle parenting and all the different styles around like the people that put things out there, and the people that we take information from really seem to have more of a person-centered approach versus a like prescription style of like, this is what you do, so you get this result. It's like, there's so much more talk about seeing people as people, even when they're children, versus like them following the rules and doing that stuff. And I think when you start unpacking that as a parent, then you get to unpack that from your experience as a kid, and how does that all line up?
Well, so I'm writing something right now for Substack that based on the podcast episode I put out yesterday. And I just realized that I didn't say that I have a podcast. Not very good stuff. Like, my whole thing, 16 episodes in, I'm really excited, is my podcast, which is called Actual People. But you can like put that in however you want to include that. But so I write a Substack article based on the episode, or sometimes it's a bit of a departure from it. It's not just the transcript. It's never like exact. but so I was writing this one and I keep like noodling on it, but I talk about, and I'm trying not to sound self-aggrandizing. So I was like,
Mhm.
do I need to say this? But I have a love first household. So that's kind of my parenting philosophy is do they feel safe, emotionally safe and comfortable? And do they feel like good about themselves? So I will sacrifice a punishment. And I think it's important, consistency, but I will like do away with the punishment if I feel like it's like hurting them. Like I'm not a punitive parent. Like I talked about that. Like I'm not a punitive parent, but
Yeah.
so to offset the, this crop of kids that have come out like, oh wait, adulthood, I have like, I don't want them to be entitled. I don't want them to be soft where they can't handle stuff. So they have chores, they have responsibilities, and anything they can do themselves, unless they're like sick or like they're really tired, like they have to do it themselves.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like get themselves a glass of water before bed. Like I'll bring up water for them before bed. If I see they haven't done it, a few things, I rub their back, I'm very like, I give them a lot of love and affection, but I do make sure that they like have a routine or respond. If they leave something behind, they have to go get it themselves. I try not to like serve them. Of course, I
Yeah.
end up doing a lot of serving. Obviously, I make them dinner and lunches and everything, but I try to make sure they're responsible for themselves because I'm not like, I don't want to see them suffer because I feel like growing up, there was a lot of like shaming and fear in my own
Mhm.
household, so I don't like, that's like, I want them to be happy and I want them to be comfortable at home. That's the first,
Mhm.
that's sort of simple for me. It's like making sure that they feel like this is a safe place for them and that place of joy, like above everything else.
Yeah. Cause I think too, like you get the like, you can say to your kids, like, you can always come home, but if home is not the place that they want to be, it's like, it's just a saying then.
Absolute. My mom used to say, safe with mom. This is like, it's like creepy as hell. And I did not feel safe with her, like, you, I never knew when the other shoe was going to drop. She had issues. She wasn't like, she didn't have like a big temper or anything, but I wouldn't get what my needs meant. I'll just put it. I didn't feel like there was no follow through. I didn't trust her at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
with my kids, it's like, for me, like saying I'm sorry if I do something wrong. Like this morning we were late to camp because I did not wash the clothes that they needed for the camp today. Really, like you could say, like they didn't say, oh, we need this shirt for today. They didn't say that. But like I was like, okay, you didn't do that, but I'm backed up on we had like lots of like swim team things day after day. So I didn't do laundry for a couple of days. But I was like, I split the responsibility. I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm responsible because I'm the only adult here. So I'm sorry that you don't have the clothes you need for school, as opposed to being like, I could easily be like, yeah, why didn't you tell me you needed this shirt for today? Which they didn't. But I was like, it's
Yeah.
on me. I am the adult to ask you if you need something. So I make sure that I'm not gaslighting them or making them responsible for something because I can convince them that it's not, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know
I
what I'm
think
talking about? Like keep taking,
yeah, like I
I
think,
take responsibility.
yeah, I mean, it's not nuanced, but I feel like that's the divide, where like maybe before parents are sort of like, oh, well, I really like, I meant to do that or whatever, but that never came out. Right? Like it always came
Right.
out at like they can think that like, oh crap, I forgot to wash that thing that they needed. But that never came out. What came out was you should have told me, or well, if you needed it, then it should have been in the laundry like 3 days ago because like can't you see how much laundry is there? And it's like that doesn't belong to
And
them.
they're only 10 years old. But at the same time, I'll be like, here, I have a little, like, this is what you have to put. They have their responsibility and they're not like absolved. But at the same time, I'd say I'm the adult. And ultimately, and I said, it's okay that we're going to be late because we're waiting for our shirt to dry. Because one of them gets
Yeah.
really angst ridden about being late. And I was like, I understand your feelings it sucks to be, it makes you anxious, but you have to try to right now let it go because this is the situation we're in. And the
Yeah.
day's going to go great anyway. And like try to help her with her feeling. I don't know. I think it's a mix of like taking responsibility and being in accepting that things don't go well all the time, but like acknowledging like I didn't shit. Because then as adults, they're gonna be this people who blame other people for everything too. If they can't mirror you taking responsibility, and they can't mirror you being accepting yourself for your flaws, both.
Yes, because then you're in that situation of like, you're the parent telling them like you're great and wonderful just as you are and all of that stuff. However, like they hear you like coming down on yourself and being hard on yourself. And I mean, that's like that stuff goes across the board, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and they do hear that. Like, it's not like, I'm like, because also if they think that you think that you're perfect or that they're going to go, why don't I feel that way about I mean, I'm not saying I like do it. Oh, I'm going to say this so that they think this, like they know that I'm like, aging sucks. I hate it. Like, I want to lose 20. Like they know I'm like, I want to lose 20 pounds. I know you're not supposed to tell your kids that. You're like, I love myself exactly how I am. My mom was like, I love myself exactly how I am. But I'm like, okay, I'm human. Like, I don't like this thing because they're going to feel that way too. Anyways, I try to tell myself that like, it's okay to let them know that you're not always like completely thrilled with everything that goes on in your own life because no one is. That's unrealistic.
Right. And that's like 2 generations back almost, where it's just like everything is either all good or everything is all crap. It's like
the 50s.
Like you're late for something, then your whole day is ruined. Versus like, now you're just independent of everything else going on in your life. You're late for this one thing, and it's gonna be what it is.
When I grew up, it was like, if you don't get A's, my parents didn't like say this necessarily. Well, they did say school was my job. But if you don't get A's in elementary school, then you're not going to do well. And you're not going to know what you need to know in high school. And then you're not going to get into a good college. If you don't get into a good college, you're not going to have a good career. It felt like a lot of pressure.
Right. It's like, if you don't know your colors by the time you're 2.5, then day's over. Like, just great job. Sorry, but what's going to unfold in the rest of your life? And it's just that idea of like,
I think I'm not a millennial. I think millennials were a little bit like that too. Mm-hmm. Are you millennial? You probably are a millennial.
I don't know what I am. I think I'm an elder millennial. I think that I have looked this up in the past and been like, wow, that's awesome. Like,
what year do you don't
84. I'm 40.
Oh God. I'm 73. 73. Yes, you are a millennial. So before I had kids late, and before I had kids, there was like in New York, I would hear moms saying, use your words. You say that. Mm-hmm. Use your words. And I, you know what? I'm not that annoyed by that now. But before I had kids, I was so annoyed by use your words. It just sounded so, I don't even know now. I'm like, why was I so hard on that? Like, they sounded so clinical. And so like, they were little experiments. And I don't know. It was like too much. It was too self-conscious parenting for me. Mm-hmm. And I would like refuse to say, use your words to my kids. But now I think that kind of makes sense. Like a friend of mine who already had kids was like, what should you say to your kids if you want them to use their words? Like, I don't know. I'm just not saying that. I just hated the Brooklyn mom. Like, I don't even know why I was so, but it did feel like everything was so like neat and packed, like the way people parented. Yeah. Like, and I did read those books, like, no screen time before my kids had no screen time before 2 years old. And I read all the brain science before they were born.
Oh my God. I remember going into my first pediatrician appointment and he was like, I am there. My body is there, but like, I am not really there. Like I think it'd been like 72 hours or something. Like I got home from the hospital the next day was the pediatrician appointment.
Oh my God.
And like, I mean, I didn't know what planet I was on. And I remember he was like, so I know that you've probably read like a bunch of books and blah, blah, blah. And I looked at my husband and I was like, I didn't read any books. And like, none, like no books. And he was like, okay. I'm like, I just sort of like, it was too much pressure to read the books was too much pressure.
Yeah. That's
because
fine.
Then like I was a student for a long time and I love that. Like I said for years and years, like if I won the lottery, I'd go back to school because I just love that. And like my brain works in a school way. And
And yet
So
you didn't read the books.
And then I didn't read the books, but I didn't read the books because I was like, I know if I read the books, I'm going to apply the school thinking of like this checklist and this, and like, is this here and all this? And I mean, my background's I learned about child development in school. And so I was like, yeah, like it's an ish, like everything's kind of like all the milestones are.
You already knew
arranged.
it then.
I knew I had been exposed to a lot of that.
Right.
But like the books.
I read Nurture Shock. And
I've never even heard of that.
And I read another book that was very similar, but I think I liked Nurture Shock better. And I think it was like the Something Brain Child. Do you know that book? Something.
There's the Whole Brain Child.
The Whole Brain Child, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then I started to read, but couldn't stand this book, like All Fun and No Joy, All Joy and No Fun. Have you heard of that?
Gosh.
No, it was about a woman saying like that parenting. I was like pregnant, and she was saying that it was joyful to have kids, but it was really no fun. Which honestly, the first 3 years that made sense, but who wants to read that anyway? It was definitely not fun.
Like you don't want that going into it. Like it's like this idea of like, I mean, especially you're pregnant with twins, right? So like that's a whole entity all on its own. I think I've like mentioned this before, but like one of my husband's friends through work, they had twins and they were part of like a twin group. And it was just families with twins in them. And then when the twins turned a year old, everybody else in that group threw a party for the parents. They didn't throw a birthday party for the kids. They threw a birthday party for the parents to say like, you survived 1 year of having twins.
Oh my
like
God,
it was like a celebration.
That is amazing because it is absolutely brutal to be a twin parent. And I got divorced when my kids were 14 months old.
Yeah, that's
our marriage did not survive the first year.
And that, I mean, that like,
we were great for 6 months. I mean, great. He was on top of things. He was great. And then I won't get into it, but it just was like, absolutely, I have to go. Yeah. It did not work out. He was not equipped, or we were not. It didn't work. So I left. I had to leave town. I had to leave my business. It was bad.
And that's when you left New York?
Mm-hmm. I had to go to South Carolina where my mother was. That's another whole, that's kind of, I addressed this in that fiction book called Claw about a monster. She's not the monster in the book, to be clear. But yeah, I moved to the deep South, like with twin toddlers, out of having a pretty successful business with my ex-husband in Brooklyn.
Yeah, like
from one day to the next. It was trauma. But you don't realize that when you're in it. You're like, oh, like you're just getting, you know what it is, like in early childhood, you're just like feeding machine.
Getting out. Yeah. Oh my God. And I think too, like that's so interesting too, because there's like, you are going through massive things, right? Like you're still postpartum, you're still like, you are a twin mom, all that stuff. But like to know, like, this is not okay, to the level of like, I am down, like my bucket is empty in every way, shape and form. And like, time to go.
Yeah. It was actually, I think I when I've talked about this in my pod, I think I did. I was sitting with my dad and he's like, it's not like something, I don't remember what he said, something like it's over, isn't it? Or something like it's not going to work. Like he just came to visit, and I like in some conversation with him, I realized like I got to leave my husband. It was horrible, and so I planned it and I left. I had to go. Like it just was untenable, and I think it's better for both of us. He's more of a wanderer. He's not domestic. I should have known when we were buying. Well, we were buying suitcases, but I was pregnant. And again, I have to emphasize that he was amazing when I was pregnant, and he was amazing the first 6 months. But he just couldn't handle it emotionally. It was too much for him. But when I was pregnant, we went to London because he's English, and I bought like at Liberties of London, I bought a rolling suitcase that was small. I'm like, this will fit both of their things in the first few years of when we travel. And he bought a backpack, like a North Face, like a big bag. I'm like, it was just such an indication, like he's a traveler, he's a wanderer, like he's not a family man that way, even though like he loves his children, and he just couldn't sit still. And I was like, why would you be buying a bag like that? It was just such a symbol of like, he's not someone who's gonna, couldn't, it was hard for him. Anyway, I won't like overanalyze him. We have a pretty solid relationship now. He lives in upstate New York and we're okay.
Yeah.
But
I think like that's the thing, like too, is that idea of like, it is what it is. And there's so much of an opportunity, like when you have this big shift, like when you have kids, and to say like, it's that like what we were talking about earlier, right? Is like you want to take all the good and you want to carry on that because, you're in a relationship with somebody and they have all these qualities that you love. Like, I'm sure you want like your kids to travel someday.
And he's a photographer and a filmmaker, and he's creative and talented and smart. He's like one of these people who's kind of like good at whatever he does. Like, you know what I mean? Like in a general sense, like, start taking pictures, and he's like, really, is this good at stuff? And they're kind of like that. And was athletic, and he's like really good athlete, but doesn't like do much about it. But like, you'll see him with a soccer ball, like balancing on his knee. He's just good at stuff. And so they are too. And yeah, I'm glad I had kids with him for a lot of reasons, even though, and I will never say anything horrible about him because that's their father. I'll talk bad about other people. I'll talk about bad about ex-boyfriends, but that he's, no, I would never. But yeah, no, I actually like a lot of things. I could like badmouth them. They're like, it's obviously not perfect, but like, I like him. Like we actually still like banter and like we've always had a good like rapport. Like we're kind of funny together. We would, I think clients liked us because we would be like riffing off of each other. He's got this dry English sense of humor. And and so, so that's good. And we can show that to our kids sometimes. Like they'll be on FaceTime and he and I will be like joking about stuff. And so,
I love that too. Cause I think there's so much like in terms of like the evolution of like what it looks like. I mean, to like when parents don't stay together, it's like there's so much of the stereotype of like these people can't even be in the same room together and they can't have conversations, and like there's that, and like that element still definitely comes through in a lot of stories, but
swaths of time where we're like we do have that, but we always somehow come back together, like because we did have this connection in the first place, like we business partners, we were expats together, and we had this history. And maybe because we didn't let it go on for like another 20 years of like hell. I mean, I think. Yeah. Like if you. Yeah. Like, I could have gotten pregnant with someone that I like didn't like at all, or, that was just like a fling. And then maybe it would have been like, oh, just get this person. And I definitely felt like early on, like, oh, go away. But we don't live near each other. And we have like this common history of, so. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. But it's like, I love it because it's like, it's just another example of you like seeing the good in people and like understanding that like, and being really accepting of like who people are. And that's the stuff like when you say like you want your kids to feel comfortable in their home and you want them to like have a place to come home and it's love first and stuff like that. It's like you're modeling something for them in relationships that don't work out, but there's still a lot of love there. And it doesn't have to be romantic love, but it's like love and understanding. And
well, that's what I tell him. I said, you're always going to be family to me. Like, you're my kid's father. Like, I mean, if you get divorced, I'm like, someone else has said to me, like, it's never over. If you have kids, if you have kids together, sorry,
like that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. They're your family forever, whether you like it or not, unless they're like a killer and you just wasted, like shun people completely. But like, for the if you want to like leave your kids whole, you're gonna have to work on that relationship on some level, even if it's not perfect or there's downtimes. Like that's your family. Like I care what happens to him. I also care about him, but like also that's their dad. Like it's also not just my ex-husband. It's like I want your dad to be okay.
Yeah, right. Because you want them to be okay.
Right.
And understanding that like no matter what that person means to you, that person means to them is where you're focusing.
Yeah, because like I can't let myself be like to vilify him because
Right.
I see his face in theirs. I mean, so I
Mhm.
don't understand how people even do that. Like,
Mhm.
unless that person's like really awful.
Yeah. And that's how you get like that's the new part. Like that's your use your words part of like accepting the parts of people, like accepting people and knowing that they have parts that work that interface well and parts that don't interface well, but like that you're creating this space where like there is comfort there. And it's in terms of like for your kids being able to be like, we're going to go see dad, or dad's coming here, or you go there, or whatever it is, like however that
He does
relationship
on Christmas. They were born on Christmas Day, so we
oh my
always
gosh,
spend Christmas together. He doesn't
I
love it.
love
I don't think he loves this, like, but we're sitting around the Christmas tree every Christmas. He's there, and
is it just like
he had a girlfriend for a while that I liked, and then he had one I did not ever meet, and that didn't last, and that's good. But and we did have one Christmas where she was there, and she was super, like, I really liked her. And if that happens again, or if I had a boyfriend for a while when we first broke up, but he was a horrible person. And that's like the example of like, if I had a kid with him, I would have just done everything to separate myself. Like, oh my God, thank God.
yeah.
But I was married to my ex-husband. It wasn't like I had already intended to have a family with him. But anyway, yeah, he's there. Like, and he'll always be there on Christmas. Like maybe when they get older, maybe they'll go spend a Christmas birthday with him or just me, or I don't know. But so far, we're always together on Christmas because that's their birthday.
That's sweet. I love that. Because then how does that work? Like, is that like a serious day for you? Like, I mean, you're doing twin birthday and Christmas. I feel like
it's crazy. In the beginning, I tried to like change all the decorations and have a birthday party at night with different colors and everything. It was insane. I don't really do it like that anymore. I mean, we do.
I'm tired. Just
we do Christmas morning and it's all Christmas. And then like we have like a walk or like a break. And then there's cake and dinner.
That's awesome.
Every Christmas birthday. We call it birthday.
Birthday.
Yeah.
I love it. So you have like, it sounds like you have a million like irons in the fire in terms of like creativity and outlets and stuff like that. So like,
hopefully not.
But I am
trying to change that. That's like, and it's hard. Like when I've done marketing and branding things my whole career and I need to make money, like it's hard to just completely walk away from it. This has been a particularly difficult year, but I do enjoy what my ex-husband and I used to do together. I don't know so much about him. We've been divorced for like over 7-8 years, but we made documentary films for brands that were like doing something innovative and interesting, and like Beyond Meat and Timex. And so now I don't really I'm trying to kind of get back to that part of it, the storytelling, the writing, the brand strategy, and as opposed to like all the marketing. But ultimately, like I said, I would like to simplify it completely and get out of it. But it's hard when you've done it over. That's what you do. I'm like, what other kind of job can I get? Like, I can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, but you've had like, so I think irons in the fire is a good thing. I think like a lot of times people are like, oh, you're spread too thin and all this stuff. But I think it's really amazing that you're a multi-passionate person. But you also pursue them to figure out like, is this something that I want to continue on with? And I think that's the part where a lot of times people get stopped, is they're like, well, I'm already doing too much, so I can't do that. And they cut themselves off the opportunity to explore that stuff. Like you have a busy life with having twins, and you have a busy life with marketing and, parenting and all of those pieces, but you're still saying like, these are the things, like I'm interested in fiction, so I'm going to dabble in this and I'm going to do that.
Well, this is, I think that I've like been like, oh, no one makes money as a writer, so I have to go stay in marketing. I have like I took a year off and wrote a novel like a long time ago now. And then I have writers workshops I go into, and I go on writers retreats. And I've been writing fiction for over a decade or more. And I just have been afraid because I'm like looking for an agent. I haven't found an agent. I'm like afraid to put myself out there. I will not self-publish. And so I just hide that more. And I like sometimes I like do a little something and show people, and then I hide again because it's so vulnerable. But trying to be like, no, life is short. I absolutely have to put the fiction out there. And I know writing is what I'm good at. I'm like, well, who says I definitely can't make money doing that? So really all this is about like trying to be honest about what I really am and hoping for the best, because I didn't take a traditional route, in career. Did you?
And that's the magic. I mean, I started, I did clinical and then kind of meandered from there. Like if I knew myself 20 years ago and said, this is what you're going to be doing for work, like you're going to be the owner of a tech startup, like, no, I'd be like, I don't think so. I think you have the wrong person. Like there was always a plan. I was like perfectly on the straight and narrow when it came to like, get the A's, go here, go to this school, get this yada, yada, yada. And then I, at one point was like, nah, we're going to take a left. We're going to take a left here and not follow the line. And that's how I ended up doing what I do now, which is what I absolutely love.
But you needed to commit to something. Otherwise, you'd still be like floating around. So that's why where I'm at, like, I need to just stop being afraid. And so I put out the podcast was a huge step for me. I was like,
yeah,
but I'm just I love it. Like I'm not, there's no stopping. Like maybe eventually, but this is my avenue forward for me. Mm-hmm. Like I'm hoping that it gets picked up and that it leads to opportunities in what I want to do, which is more in the creative realm and writing and entertainment and film and those things that. Yeah. But I was like, oh, marketing is the way you make money. But then when everything started to get like all these layoffs happened and like was so hard to get clients, I'm like, okay, maybe why am I trying to do this something that with all my energy when I don't even really want to do it? I'm trying to do it for money and also because I know how to do it. And I'm pretty good at most of it. But I'm like, why am I trying so hard? It's not something I really want. It's because I'm afraid that it's too hard to make money as a writer and a creative. So I was doing the other thing. But I'm like, if that's not making me money, I might as well focus on what I do actually really care about.
Yeah, just put that out there. What's the worst that can happen?
Well, nothing, but it's yet to show financial it's yet to show financial reward.
Right. And that's a big piece of it. But can you, because it's written, can you put it out there?
Oh, you mean my books? My books, my fiction?
Yeah, get those picked up.
Well, this is that's why I did that first chapter of Claw. So I'm thinking like I will end my podcast every other one with a chapter.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm going to see, but it's like scary.
But everything's scary, right? Like having twins is scary. Getting married is scary. Moving out of your home and like just taking off to go to a place that is different and new. Like all of that stuff is scary. And you've done all those things in the past.
Right. How do you sustain your business and grow your business? Like, do you have a big team to do things for you or you delegate?
Mm-hmm. I am a terrible delegator.
Me too. Yeah, it's hard.
It is very hard. But yeah, no, we're growing and growing slowly. And I think that's the part that I really actually like about it. Cause I feel like a lot of times you get this idea of like, go fast, build big, fail and move on and all of this stuff. And I don't love that because I really want it to be an intentional trajectory. And if the curve is not steep, just for the sake of it being steep, then I feel better about that.
Yeah. I also am writing an article for Inc. based on something I like a little short missive I wrote, but I feel like because we all are slowing down because funding is not where it was. And there's been a lot of humbling of all kinds of people, like the playing field's a bit leveled. People have had time to think about what, not just me. I mean, a lot of people I know think about what they want to do. And especially like when you're going through a life transition, a lot of people I know are like their kids are going to college or they're like aging out of a certain part of their life or like it's not. So I feel like all those different factors are coming together where people are being more intentional. That whole fail fast thing, I think maybe hopefully that era is kind of drawing to a close and that things are just slowing down where people are thinking about what they're doing. They're not just trying to make a quick buck. It's, the startup community used to be like kind of like raise money like quickly and get out and have an exit. Like how many exits can you like accrue? And because the money's not there, then people have to think about what they, investors have to think about what they're investing in, and entrepreneurs have to think about like if what they're doing actually adds value. You have to work harder for things. We have an election year and like climate change, and all these people are so afraid of all these of like what's going on in the environment that it's like the cream rising to the top it has to be things that are more thoughtful.
Yeah. That's the intention, is that, it's not the idea of like putting something out just to put something out. Cause I do agree. I think that those days, and especially in different industries and like I work in care tech. So it's all caregiver resources and care based. And I mean, there are ways that people go into it and say like, how can I like make a product that is like, a viral product and then raise or, have this explode and then get out. But I think that because there is so much more intimacy in the use of these products, that people are really being super intentional in how they're building them, which will benefit people in the end, the people that use them.
Right. You have longer cycles, right?
Yeah.
I remember when we first talked, I was trying to do something with paper, right? Mm-hmm. That's something that I did and failed. And I think it was because I love design and aesthetics and I love paper. I'm a writer, but I'm like, that's not my area. That's not where that's not my biggest contribution. My biggest contribution is probably more intellectual capital rather than physical products. You know what I mean? But I think whatever you're choosing to do, you need to think really about like, is this the most of your gift? Are you making the most of your own gift that you're sharing with the world? And if, are you happy about the process of doing it? The process of doing it when no one's listening or no one's knows what you're doing. Is that, and I did have fun with like in the creative realm of like doing the paper product things, but it was just like a little bit of what I'm good at. It wasn't, I don't know. I don't know if you know, The War of Art. I have it above my bookshelf. Stephen Pressfield.
Okay.
And it's about like, a shadow career. It's about shadow careers. He talks about like doing something similar to what you really should be doing, but like having a career that's really an avoidance of what you really should be doing.
Yeah.
Like maybe working in advertising when really you want to be a filmmaker but it doesn't have to be
a fiction writer.
What?
Or a fiction writer.
But, I interviewed somebody on my podcast who was like, well, it doesn't have to be a binary. Because I was saying like, I don't want to work in advertising. And I talked about this a little bit. She's like, well, it's not a binary. You can still. And I was like, it's not a binary. Like you can do a little bit of both. And that's kind of what you're saying too. But
it's just sort of figuring out where you want the energy to go, but also being open to exploring, like, maybe I want to try this and let's just research and get into it a little bit and put a chapter out there or launch the podcast or whatever and see where it goes. Because I wholeheartedly agree. Like prior to launching this podcast, I was like, I really would like to do this. Can I do this? Should I do this? Is this? And it's like, the only way you're going to know is if you do this.
Right. Maybe, and I do think like you need to take some, if you love it, you have to give it time. That's the thing I've been bad at in the past. Like, oh, it's not working. I quit. like two episodes or whatever. Like if it was a podcast, this is my first podcast, but being like, oh, I try. and thinking, sometimes I'd be like, I think I've done a lot more than I have. I'll be like, oh, 5 podcasts, just as an example, 5 episodes in, being like, oh my God, it's not on the New York Times best or whatever. It's not like Apple Podcast of the Week. Obviously, it's a failure.
Well, there's a statistic, like it's like 80 or 90% of podcasts don't go past 3 episodes.
Oh yeah. I didn't know what the number was. I thought it was like bigger than that, longer, more than those.
Like most people are like, I'm going to launch a podcast, and it doesn't like go viral, and it ends. So
there was what I'm not going to say. There was somebody that I knew that was like that. Their whole thing was podcasting, and they were like, I saw that they had put something out like, I'm launching this podcast, and it's the series. It was like really very specific and lots of like hype, and then it's now like 8 months later, and there's like 4 episodes that are like very weirdly spaced apart. I mean,
yeah,
that's possible. If that's you realizing like maybe that person realized like this isn't for me, or I don't really have time for it. So it's no judgment, but yeah. So that made me feel I'm like, I've really stuck with it. And so have you. And, some people are like hundreds of episodes in, and it's hard to know like what makes money. I know that podcasts took a big hit this year, but
yeah,
people still listen to they listen to them more than ever. So
yeah. And I think the pandemic ultimately was helpful in the podcast realm, because people are home and you're listening to them and all of that piece.
Or driving. So, I listen to a lot of them.
Yeah.
Road trip.
Yeah. So what's your forward marching vision? Not plan, because plans are too rigid. What's your vision?
I get a little bit like that whole thing I was just talking about, like making big plans, and then my plan would be to get a book deal. Like my big deal is to get a book deal and to get a license to get a master's in, it wouldn't be a PhD, a master's in counseling, and to become a therapist and to write books and to have a book deal and writing. That's my dream. That's what I want. And honestly, I would love to find somebody who was a screenwriter, because I'm not that, to collaborate on a screenplay.
That would be cool.
Those are dreams of mine. Yeah.
I love them.
So if you know any really amazing screenwriters, I know what I'm not, and I'm not that, but like, I don't write like great dialogue. Actually, I've been told specifically that I do write good dialogue, but I don't write. I was like, really, like, oh, I really like their dialogue. I'm like, really? Like, I don't know. I definitely don't. I wouldn't. I'm like, I don't have any like, yes, I have this gift to write like really, Aaron Sorkin level dialogue, and I'm not going to go into something where I don't think, it would sound very stilted. I'd be like, it would be very like tell not show if I wrote it. But so yeah, having collaborations I think are interesting. It's important to me, and also just to survive the next couple of years if I decide to go get back to school financially. So getting clients would be like the first big vision. I had a client that I was supposed to start off with this week, and I'm still like kind of waiting, but it's just been rough. It's been tough the last year. I like working with innovative companies. Like this is a plant protein company, and telling their story and looking into that. I still do like business, and I would love to have a steady stream of clients where I'm helping them with their brand storytelling, and I enjoy that. I don't enjoy looking for clients, but I enjoy doing that work.
Yeah, it's that idea of like, if it fits, then it fits. Well, tell people where they can find you, because I imagine that there's you're going to have readers, and if you tell people what you're writing and you tell people what you're putting out there, then people will be able to find your writing and your.
Yeah, I wish that was like the old days, and I could get like a publicist. Like,
oh, that'd be awesome.
Somebody I was doing some work with said like, she has a forensic ability to understand culture. I was like, I like that. But now I'm saying it sounds really stupid if I'm saying it. But yes, my writing is on Substack. So it's chaunceyzalkin.substack.com. Okay. And look for Actual People wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. And Actual People is every other episode, it's an interview, and some are monologues, and they're all about like cultural analysis and often peppered with personal stories from like the myriad of experiences and places that I've lived about just the human experience and creative entrepreneurship, things that we've talked about on this episode.
I love it.
And also part of Substack, you'll see links to my fiction whenever it comes out. And yeah, really right now I'm trying to get people to join my Substack and subscribe to my podcast, because that's where that's more than I've eliminated a lot of social media. I don't know about you, but that's where I really want to focus. I wanted to build a community on Substack for now, and listeners to my podcast, and hopefully those will become my readers of books that I publish.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.